Masechet Baba Batra Daf Mem Bet Shelosha Lakochot Mistarfin Amarav V'chulam Bishtar. So the Gemara starts off with a halacha that three different buyers can join together to make a chazakah. The case is as follows. You have an original owner of some field, and he sells it to A, who lives on it for a year, and then sells it to B, who lives on it for a year, who sells it to C, and C lives on it for a year. So now this is 3 years altogether. So the question is, can they make a chazakah all together? Now let's say C doesn't have his deed of sale anymore. He lost it. But he claims, oh listen, together we have a chazakah. We've all been here, A, B, and C put together, have been here for 3 years, and you never protested, and therefore, since you never protested, we have a chazakah, and I have a chain of custody, I have a claim, and therefore I don't need to produce a deed, and we can keep it. So, can you do that? Can you make a chazakah? This statement says, yes, 3 different people can make a chazakah. However, Rav says, listen, I agree with this law as long as each of them had a deed of sale, that they didn't just sell it in front of witnesses without writing it down. They have to have written it down. Why? Because when you write something down, then that definitely makes it public. You need witnesses, and you have the scribe who's there also, and it's an event that's done often in public in the marketplace, and then you have this document that goes around, and people will see it. So when something is recorded in a document, then it will have publicity. Because of that, the owner will get the original owner will get the message that, oh, this land has been sold. He says, what? Someone sold this land? It's my land. And he will know to go and make a protest. However, if these sales are done without a written document, in that case, the original owner, what does he see from his perspective? He doesn't know that A sold it to B, who sold it to C. From his perspective, this is his land. Now, he sees A squatting on his land for 1 year. So he doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's only 1 year. So he's like, I'm not going to make a protest. And then he sees B squatting on his land for a year. So his assumption is, A, when he took some produce, all right, I don't care about it. He abandoned the field. Then B came in. So there's a field that he's not using, so he doesn't care. It's only for 1 year, so it doesn't make a chazakah. And he abandoned it, and then C came is in it for a year. So if the original owner didn't protest, and can say, I didn't protest because I had no idea that you were making these sales to each other. None of you are the actual owner. I didn't make a protest because I didn't know you made a sale. I thought you were just coming, squatting on the land, leaving for a year. 1 year does not make a chazakah, so I didn't bother. However, if it's done with therefore, if it's done without a document, then it does not create a chazakah, because we cannot expect that the original owner heard about it. They can only make a chazakah, A, B, and C put together, if they sold it to one another with a deed that would have made a public public announcement, and then the original owner would have heard about it and would have came and said, "Hey, Mr. A, you sold it to B. This is my land. B, you sold it to C. He would have made a protest. If he didn't make a protest, even though it was sold with a written document, well, then the 3 can join together to make a chazakah. All right, that's the opening halacha. Now, we make an inference. Lememra desava Rav shtar itle kala ve'adim letlu kala. So are we to understand that according to Rav, only if you have something written down in a bill of sale, in a document, then that creates publicity. But if there was no bill of sale, but there were witnesses, that would not be sufficient. You see, because Rav does not say, well, as long as there were witnesses to the sale, then it would create publicity. He doesn't say that. He says only if it's written down. So that means if there was just 2 witnesses, that would not create publicity, and therefore it would not make a chazakah. The original owner can still say, well, it was witnesses. Well, I didn't hear about it, and there was no chance that it was not likely I was going to hear about it. That's why I didn't protest. I thought you were just 3 squatters. I didn't know you were connected to each other and selling them. So we see that based on this statement, according to Rav, witnesses do not create publicity. Here's the problem. This would contradict something else that I've said. Rav also said that if someone sells land with witnesses, then the buyer can collect from liened property. So what does that mean? So let's say I sell you land, and we do it in front of witnesses, and I guarantee the land, which means that I'm selling you the land. If this land should be repossessed by my creditors, then you can come and take my other land that I sold subsequently if I don't have any cash on hand. Okay, so one can do that. Now, how can one do that? How can you create a lien? You can only create a lien if there's publicity, because the buyers, let's say I sold you my land on January 1st, and I said as a guarantee, if anybody takes that land, I will pay you back at January 1st. Okay, so now someone comes and takes the land, and then you come to me and say, listen, I have no cash, but I did have some land that I owned at the time that I sold on February 1st. So you can go take that land from the buyers of the February 1st land. Now, how can you do that? Only if the original sale to you on January 1st was public. And that way, the buyers in the February sale will know about it, and they took that into account when they bought it. Then you can create a lien. That's why you can only create a lien with a document. Let's say a loan document, it creates a lien because it has publicity. The buyers of the land know what they're getting into. If not, then it doesn't create a lien. So we see from this statement that you don't have to sell a piece of land with a document to make a lien. Even with witnesses, you can make a lien, which means that witnesses create publicity. So this contradicts what we just inferred, that something done with witnesses does not create publicity. And our answer is, Hatam lakochot inhu afsidu anafshaihu. The case of a buyer of land is different. Buyers, when they buy land, they have to do a lien check. They have to go get title insurance, and they have to go check with the public registry, ask around, does anybody have a lien on it? And therefore, for that purpose, witnesses is sufficient. Witnesses will not create a lot of publicity, but it will be enough that if someone asks around, they'll be able to find out. And therefore, anytime someone buys land, and so those people that bought in February, it was their obligation to do their due diligence and find out if there was a lien on the property. If they didn't do it, then they lose out on their own. That's their problem. That's different from the case of chazakah. Here, there's a guy who owns land. He doesn't have to do due diligence on his own land, so he's just sitting around. He sees one guy squatting, he doesn't care for 1 year. For another guy squatting for a year, he figures the first guy abandoned it, and so on the third guy also. So there's not enough publicity with just witnesses that he would have heard about it. So for the case of the chazakah, it has to be in a written document. That way, it has a lot of publicity. The original owner will have heard it and should protest. If he doesn't protest, even though it was in a written document, then the chazakah works. So that's different from the buyers of a field, where before they buy it, they have to do investigation. For that, edim are sufficient. So in summary, a shtar creates a publicity that everybody would know about, even just a passive owner, whereas edim is in between. It doesn't create a huge amount of publicity, but only if someone does investigation, they'll be able to find it out. If you do something not in front of witnesses and not written at all, well then that's just private, and then you could not expect anyone to even find that out, so there's no lien on such a property. Good. Now we ask further on this distinction that we just made here regarding the sale. Mi amar rav hachi v'hatenan hamalvet chavero bishtar gove menechasim mishubadim ayide aidim gove menechasim benechorin. We have a Mishnah later on that says, if someone lends money to someone else with a written document, then the lender can reclaim his money even from lien property. So because when there's a loan with a document, that creates a lot of publicity, and the buyers of that person's property will hear about it, and so they'll know that it might be collected. They take that into account. That's only if it's a written document. But if it's done with witnesses, this is again a loan in front of witnesses, then the lender can only collect from unsold property, but cannot go after. So here we see that witnesses do not create a lien. We just said over here that according to Rav, witnesses are sufficient to create a lien in the case of a sale. But here this Mishnah says that witnesses do not create a lien in the case of a loan. And maybe you'll say Rav, he was an early Amorah, the earliest generation. In fact, he was so early, he studied directly from the Tanaim. And sometimes he's considered like a Tana. He's right on the border, and he can argue with the Mishnah. So maybe you'll say that maybe Rav argues with this Mishnah, and he says, no, witnesses are sufficient to create a lien. That's what he said regarding, in this statement, they can create a lien for a sale, and so they can create a lien. He argues with this Mishnah. But that won't work here. Rav himself and Shemuel, his colleague, both said that if you make a loan orally, then you cannot cannot collect from heirs, and you cannot collect from buyers, meaning it does not create a loan. So even without this Mishnah, even if you say Rav disagrees with a Mishnah, but he can't disagree with himself. So now we have a question that can you make a lien with witnesses? First he said yes, and then he said no. And the answer is milveh azebine karamit milveh ki kayazif besin'a kayazif ki echi dela li tazlu nichse ale zebine man de zabin ar'a befares yazabin ki echi dela pukla kala. You're comparing two different cases. One is a loan and one is a sale. So when it comes to a loan, when someone borrows money, he does so in private because he does not want people to know that he's short of cash, and because if so, his property will be devalued. Though when people come to buy things from him, like, oh, I know this guy is strapped for cash. He just took a loan out from that other guy. I heard about it. And so then they'll pay him less because they know that he's in trouble. When a person borrows money, he does so discreetly. So even though he's doing it in front of witnesses, he doesn't go around telling people. He does it when no one's around. And that's why, in the case of a loan, if it's not in a written document, then it does not create a lien on the borrower's properties because he's discreet about it. Whereas when it comes to a sale, whoever buys and sells land, he does so in public, especially the buyer. He wants everybody to know, hey, I just bought land. Look how well I'm doing. And then his this is the ancient version of credit scores. They didn't have an official FICO scores, but they had word of mouth. Oh, did you hear he borrowed a lot of money? I guess he's in need. Did you hear that guy just bought property? So he must be doing well. And then people will want to do more business. He can sell his stuff for more money because they know that he's in a solid position. So when it comes to buying, he wants everybody to know. And therefore, even though there's witnesses, he's going to do it in public, in the middle of the marketplace, in the middle of the day, showing everybody that he bought land. And therefore, that does create a lien, right? Because if he buys it on condition that there's a guarantee, then all the buyers afterwards will know, oh, there's a guarantee on this person's land. This person gave out a guarantee. So whatever he sells could be recollected if that land that he sold before in January is recollected. So that will have public knowledge enough for any buyer subsequently to do his due diligence and check if there is a lien on the property. Okay, now that answers all those questions. Tenor Rabbanan. Achala ha'av shana ve'haben shetayim. Ha'av shetayim ve'haben shana. Ha'av shana ve'haben shana. V'halokeach shana. Harezo chazaka. Now a new braita that if you have land that the father owned and he consumed it for 1 year, and then the son inherited it and the son used it for 2 years, that creates a chazakah. The father and son can be continuous ownership, and if no one protests during all that time, they have a chazakah. And also if the father had it for 2 years and the son 1 year, same thing. Or if the father consumed it for 1 year and then a son inherited it and consumed it for 1 year, and then he sold it to someone else, then that buyer consumed it for 1 year. Also, all these things create a chazakah. Okay, good. Now, we can infer from here, should we infer from here that a buyer creates publicity? Must be that it creates publicity, because if not, then the original owner or alleged original owner will say, well, I saw this person on and that person on, and then someone else completely, so I didn't make a protest because I thought they were just abandoning it. Has to be here that a buyer creates a publicity for the original owner to hear about it, and therefore protest. So according to this, it sounds like a buyer. There is a protest when someone buys land. But here's the question. Urminhi, achala bifnei ha'ab shana, bifnei haben shetayim, bifnei ha'ab shetayim, bifnei haben shana, bifnei ha'ab shana, bifnei haben shana, ubifnei lokeach shana, hare zo chazaka. V'isaka da'atech lokeach itle kala, en lecha macha gedola mizo. A contradiction from a Tosefta that goes from the other way around. This is a case of someone who is squatting on a land, consuming it in front of a father for 1 year. In other words, this father is there, and who's eventually going to claim that they are the owners. But now, if I'm consuming it and the so-called original owners are right in front of it, then don't protest. Then it's going to be a chazakah if it goes for 3 years. So here are the combinations. If someone's squatting on land and the father is there for a year, and then the son inherits it, and he continues for 2 years, well then that squatter has a chazakah because they didn't protest. Or if he consumes it while the father is watching for 2 years and then the son for 1 year, also creates chazakah. And similarly, if he consumes it while the father is there watching and doesn't say anything for 1 year, and then the son inherits it for 1 year, and then someone buys it, and that buyer doesn't say anything about some other guy on the land, well, then that is also a chazakah. Now, here's the question. If you think that when someone buys land that has publicity, well, then that is the protest. You're saying you're claiming the possessor, squatter, is claiming a chazakah because he's there for 3 years and no one protested. But this is a protest. If there's a sale from the son to someone else, right? That's the greatest protest. What, you think you own this because you're sitting on the land? We let you squat because we didn't care about it. And this is the protest by selling it to someone else. That shows that this is mine. And therefore, since you should have heard, if selling land creates publicity, then the squatter should have heard about it. And if he really bought it, let's say he's claiming that he bought it from the father, then he should hold on to his deed. He has to hold on to his deed in order to protest the protest. That will be his counterclaim. So, but if there's no call, if selling something does not make a protest, does not make a publicity, well then he wouldn't know to hold on to it. So at first, we learn from here that someone who sells something has a publicity, right? A sale creates publicity. And that's why the one who buys it can create a chazakah, because I bought it, and so this is right. You should have known about it, that I bought it from them, and some original guy didn't protest. So that creates a chazakah. So from this baraita, we learned that someone who buys something, land, creates publicity. But from this, which is the other way around, we derive that selling something, buying something, does not create publicity, because that's the only way that it can make a chazakah, right? Listen, I have a chazakah, but there's no way that I, as the squatter here, could be expected to learn that you bought something from the son who inherited from the father. How is I supposed to know that? It doesn't create publicity. So we have a contradiction between these two sources. And the answer is, Amar Rav Papa ki tanyahi b'mocher sedotav setam. Rav Papa says this baraita is talking about someone who sells his land without specification. He sells some land to someone else and says, listen, I'm going to sell you 25% of my lands. And he doesn't specify which ones he's going to sell. And that's why the one who's squatting, he doesn't know that it's the land that he's on. He assumes that some other land that the seller is going to give to the buyer. That's why he didn't protest. Then later it turns out that he had in mind to sell that specific land that the squatter is on. So the squatter says, well, I didn't keep my deed because I didn't know you were talking about my land. I heard about it. And so basically selling land does create a publicity. And if it was a specific sale, then yes, it would create publicity, and the squatter would have to keep his deed, and it would not create a chazakah. In this case, it creates a chazakah only because it was an unspecified sale, so the squatter didn't know that they were talking about his land, and that's why he wasn't sure to keep the deed, and that's why it creates a chazakah. Next Mishnah, ha'umanin v'hashutafin v'ha'arisin v'ha'apotropin en lahem chazakah. לא לאיש חזקה בנכסי אשתו, ולא לאישה חזקה בנכסי בעלה, ולא לאב בנכסי הבן, ולא לבן בנכסי האב. This Mishnah is complicated because it's going to use the word chazakah in different senses. Chazakah can mean for land, if I'm consuming the land for 3 years, then I have a presumption of ownership along with the claim. For movable items, it means that if I'm holding on to this wallet or this book, then I have a presumption, even without 3 years. Just if I have it right now, then I'm presumed to be the owner unless someone takes it out. And it also has another meaning of acquiring something. In order to make an acquisition of land, so even if I paid you for the land, I have to go and lock the gate, dig something, use the land as an owner would, or use an animal like an owner would in order to acquire something. Okay, so we're going to see all these three different definitions depending on what we're talking about. So a craftsman, let's say I give a craftsman my suit to tailor, and so now it's in his possession. Does that mean he can come and say, well, I own this suit, this is mine? I say, well, no, it's not yours. He says, well, look, it's in my hands. So can you create a presumption of ownership just by having it in his hand? No, he's a tailor. Of course he has people's clothing, so a craftsman cannot presume ownership over an item just because it's in his hand. And so to a partner, if we're partners in a certain thing, and now you are using it, so it doesn't mean it's yours, even for land that you have for a long time. So you're using this land, yeah, but we were partners going in, so of course you're allowed to be there. Why would I protest you being on land that we are sharing? So a partner cannot claim a chazakah and kick the other partner out. And so too, a sharecropper, the sharecropper is there and he's consuming the land for however many years we agreed to. Could be 5 years, 10 years. So he's a sharecropper. He can't come and say, look, I've been consuming this for 3 years and nobody protested. No, you made a deal that you're a sharecropper. So therefore the owner can say, no, you are a sharecropper, right? And therefore you cannot make a chazakah. And so to a steward who's overseeing the property of orphans. So he's coming and going and buying and selling for them, and maybe is coming onto the property and doing things that an owner would, but that's because he's a steward. And so since we know you are a steward for a property, you are not the owner, and so that none of these people can create a chazakah. And similarly, a husband cannot make a chazakah on his wife's property, nor his wife on his husband's property, because they're not going to protest each other. They're as long as they're married, they have equal use, a right to use it. So even if a wife brings property into the marriage, and now the husband consumes it during the entire extent of the marriage, he has a right to take the produce and sell it and use the money for the upkeep of the family. He can't come and say, oh, look, see, I've been here for 5 years, and tells his wife, you never protested. No, they're married, so they're sharing the use of the property. And it's also not a father to a son, and not a son to a father. They cannot create a chazakah on each other because they don't mind that the other is living on the property with them, or using their property, or coming onto their property. And so therefore, none of these people can make a chazakah. נותן מתנה, האחים שחלקו והמחזיק בנכסי הגר, נעל וגדל ופרץ כלשהו, הרי זו חזקה. All this was talking about trying to make a presumption of ownership by staying in a property for 3 years. However, now we're switching to a different definition of machazik as possessing, taking possession of something. When I buy land, I have to do something to take possession. So in cases like that, if I'm giving property over, and it could be I'm giving property to one of these relationships or any of these people, and I'm giving it as a gift, in order for the recipient to actually take possession, they have to do a chazakah, they have to lock the gate. Or let's say you have brothers and they inherit a property from their father, and now they want to divide it. So how do they divide it? Okay, they decide, you take this, so now I'm going to go shovel in my side, and the other brother will shovel in his side. Or if there's a convert who dies without any heirs because he converted, his biological heirs are not his, and he doesn't have any children after he converts, and someone comes and takes it, so they can only take possession by doing something. So in that case, if they lock it or fence or breach the fence, all these things create a chazakah, meaning a taking possession of property. So these people cannot make the first time kind of chazakah of a presumption for living on something for 3 years. That can apply to craftsmen also. If I hire someone to build a house on my property, so he's there, maybe it takes him 3 years, and he's coming every day and doing things on my field. Yeah, but he's a builder. He doesn't own the house just because he's doing things there. So and none of these people or in these people in these relationships can make a presumption of ownership by having it for 3 years. But if any of them is going to make a deal of splitting something or giving something as a gift, then they can take ownership by making a chazakah, by using it as an owner would. That's the Mishnah. Abu Shmuel Levi Tanu, Shutaf en lo chazakah, v'kol sheken uman. So the father of Shmuel and Levi, they both understood the Mishnah, meaning they had their text of the Mishnah was such that they learned that partners cannot make a chazakah on each other, and certainly not a craftsman. If you have two partners that own a field together, so one of them's like, oh, look, so I'm here for 3 years, and try to kick the other partner out, he can't do that because they're partners. So the other one has a right to be there without the other one protesting. It's not expected that he would protest. And all the more so a craftsman, a builder that comes on the land, certainly cannot make a chazakah because he has even less claim to the land than a partner. However, Shmuel himself, Shmuel Taneh, Uman en lo chazakah, aval shutaf yesh lo chazakah. He disagreed with his father, and he says that a craftsman cannot make a chazakah. You're a builder for 3 years on the land. You cannot claim it's yours because everybody knows you're a builder and that's what you do. However, a partner can make a chazakah. It is possible for a partner to say, look, I've been on this land the whole time, using it 3 years, and claim that the partner, although they were partners once upon a time, he says, oh, you sold me the land over 3 years ago, and you see, you never protested that I've been going and using this land. ועזדה שמואל לתעמד, אמר שמואל, השותפים מחזיקים זה על זה, ומעידין זה על זה, ונעשים שומרי שכר זה לזה. And we have another statement of Shemuel that's consistent with that one, because he also says that partners one can make a chazakah on the other, meaning if he uses this land, he can claim, it's mine, and the other guy, he should have protested or kept a deed in order to certify that he is a partner. So yes, you can make a claim. That's exactly what he just said here. And also, they can testify for each other. If someone has a suit against one of the partners, and let's say regarding one half of the property that they use, and then we need testimony from someone else. It can't be someone who's involved, who's biased. So the other partner who uses the other half of the land can testify on behalf of his partner. So in other words, we consider them like they're separate entities. So these all go hand in hand. Just like he can make a chazakah on the other half, on the property of the property of his partner, so too they can testify on behalf of each other, and they're not considered that they're biased. And if one is watching the field of the other, he can collect money and get paid like a shomer sachar, since he has the responsibility of a shomer sachar, meaning since this is my half and that's your half, so if I'm watching your half, I expect you to watch my half, and you expect me to watch your half, so we also are each benefiting from each other, and therefore we take on the responsibility like a shomer sachar. So the common denominator in all these three is that we consider partners as if they're two distinct entities, but just that they are in a partnership, but we treat them as if, this half is yours and that half is yours, as if it was privately or separately owned. Okay, Rameh le Rabbi Abba Rav Yehuda b'Ma'arta debe Rav Zakai. Mi amar Shmuel shutaf yesh lo chazakah. So now we have a contradiction. We raise a contradiction. Rabbi Abba did to Rav Yehuda when he was in the cave of Rav Zakai's house. He had maybe a room, and in a room that was called the cave of his house. And he asked this question: did Shmuel really say that a partner can make a chazakah against another partner and kick off his partner and say, this is all my land and you sold it to me? But Shemuel also said that a partner is like someone who enters a field with permission. Like a sharecropper, he has permission to go and come. A builder, he has permission to go and come. Someone who works on a certain land. A gardener or a cleaner, right? All these people, that's why they're there. Just because he comes in and out doesn't mean he owns the place. And so a partner is just like that. A partner is expected that he can come in and out of the land, and the other partner can't say, hey, what are you doing here? And therefore will not protest. If there's no expectation of a protest, then you can't make a chazakah either. So Shemuel seems to contradict himself. Lav lememra de shutaf eno chazakah. If you're saying that a shutaf is someone who comes and goes with permission, then doesn't that mean that a partner cannot create a chazakah and claim, hey, you sold it to me? So how do we resolve this contradiction? La kashya, ha denachit lekula, ha denachit lepalga. Amrila lehaigisa, v'amrila lehaigisa. There's no problem. One of these statements of Shemuel is when the one partner goes and enters all of the field, and the other statement is when he only enters half the field. Now, which statement did he say in which case? Some explain it one way, and some explain it the opposite way. Okay, so how can we explain this in both ways? You can say as follows. When Shemuel says that you can make a chazakah on the other person's property, that's a case where one partner is using the entire property. He's coming and going and using the entire thing. Well then, yes, he can make a chazakah because the other guy should say, hey, stay on one side. So if he takes the whole thing, then he should have made a protest, then you can make a chazakah. But if he only stays in one part of the property, well then the other guy, that's why he didn't protest. So there's no chazakah if he doesn't come to one part of the property. So that's the way to say it in that direction. And we can say the other way around. If one of the partners stays on only one half, then he can make a chazakah on that half and say, listen, you sold me this totally and this is totally mine, and we split it, and then you have some part and I have the other part. Maybe he even used more than a half. Maybe he used 3/4 of it, and so they say, no, see, we made a split and I take this part and you only have that quarter. We made a split and it was 3/4 1/4. So if he doesn't use part of it, then he can make a chazakah. But if he uses all of it, well, then the other partner says he's using all of it because we share all of it. I go all over it and over the whole thing, and he's also allowed to use the entire thing. So he would not protest if he was using the entire thing. So you cannot make a chazakah if you use the whole thing, but you can make a chazakah if you use part of it, right? And don't use part of it, and then you say, oh, see, I only used this part, so you should have protested if I was encroaching on yours. But I used this part the whole time, so you see that obviously we did split it. So you can argue this argument both ways, but one way or another, we can resolve the two parts of Shemuel. Ravina Amar, ha ve'ha denachit lechula ve'la kashya, ha de'it badin chaluka ve'ha delet badin chaluka. Ravina says, I have a different way of resolving the two statements of Shemuel. Both of them are a case where one of the partners is using the entire land, and there's no contradiction. If it's big enough that it can be split, right? Remember, it has to be big enough that each person can have 4 amot for this side and 4 amot for that side. If it's that big, then even while they're partners, we would expect that partner A would use this half and partner B would use that half. In that case, if partner A is using the entire thing for 3 years and partner B doesn't say anything, well then he can claim a chazakah. So if it's big enough, then yes, he has a chazakah. But let's say it's smaller than 7 amot. It's 7 amot or smaller. So then it cannot be split. And meaning it's not really usable as you use this half and I use that half. In that case, when there's a partnership, generally they would share the time. You use it for 5 years, I'll use it for 5 years. In that case, the fact that partner A used the entire thing for 3 years does not show that he is the owner because it's too small for them to both use it at the same time. And so in that case, using the field for 3 years does not make a chazakah, and so that is another way to resolve the two statements of Shemuel. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.